I describe the state of economic integration in Latin America and Mexico as uneven, quite frankly. Over the course of the last 30 or 40 years, you've seen a great degree of integration and globalization and this sort of economic alliances forming around the world. And in Latin America, quite frankly, less so. Two of the biggest countries, Argentina and Brazil, really aren't uh, as integrated as they could and should be, and probably would be beneficial to them. And you see weakness in governance. Obviously, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua being the primary examples. But across the region, there's been some deterioration in their commitments to democracy. And I think their ability to integrate economically and create opportunities for many of their citizens uh, is directly related to governance and democracy. So it's uneven. Mexico, in many respects, is the outlier by virtue of a 25-year plus relationship to first NAFTA and now USMCA. A very significant degree of their GDP is related to trade with the United States and Canada. You've seen, over the course of this pandemic and this particular administration, some deterioration in the platform. They've got a couple of matters pending, may go to arbitration on energy. So there's been less investment in that regard. But if you look at what's kept Mexico in reasonably good shape, given the economic downturn and the pandemic, the inflationary cycle that we're in, what has kept Mexico somewhat healthy economically are their exports to the United States around manufacturing, a lot of automotive, and the other, honestly, is their remittances. So, if you look around the region, you can't say that that there is a one statement that would fit their commitment to integration and trade. And in some cases, it ties back to governance, and in others, it's just a model that, Brazil is a good example, large economy, but not particularly integrated. So I say Mexico is the exception, uh, but in many respects, also a good example for others seeking to create more growth in their countries. In the wake of the pandemic, a recognition that China is, I say, more of a competitor. I mean, I think that's a generous characterization. It seems like we're in a little more uh, uh, contentious sort of relationship with China now, but uh, showing some leadership in the region, North America and Latin America, I think is consistent with our notion that we've got to bring some of these supply chains closer to home. That we've got to work more closely with allies, uh, those that are friendly and our interests are somewhat aligned, broadly aligned. I think there's a real opportunity for the United States. But again, I've not seen a particularly large appetite for leading on trade. So I think there's an opportunity, certainly consistent with our geopolitical interest and our desire to grow the economy. But I'm not sure I've seen a real appetite or a strategic commitment to growing trade in the region. I think there's a very real relationship between economic growth and in these countries and migration. I mean, when you've seen the push factors or lack of opportunity and or in many cases natural disaster and the inability to deal with that. The other is just, quite frankly, despair, the levels of corruption, insecurity, these sorts of things. So when you don't have the governance and the rule of law around which you would attract investment and create opportunities for trade, those are very definitely creates an environment that is a push factor for immigration, much of which obviously ends up on our southern border. I think President Biden's initiative at the Summit of the Americas was well received here in Mexico, largely because it was viewed, certainly within the business community, as creating another forum for discussion around issues that need resolution within USMCA. And it was also viewed as an opportunity to meet more regularly uh, and move implementation down the road. So I think in the business community it was received well,
Hmm.
and I think the fact that President Lopez Obrador embraced that after having passed on the summit itself is an indication that while they are not the biggest free traders in the world or the biggest committed to attracting investment in the energy space, let's say, they recognize that trade is something that this country needs here in Mexico very badly.